Hi, everyone, in good health and good spirits. Hello, Thomas.
Johannes, good to see you.
Good to see you in your office.
Yes.
At which college again? Remind me, or which university?
Mount St. Mary's University,
In?
Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Where you do what?
I am a professor of graphic design. So I'm starting the graphic design department here at,
Yeah.
uh, at Mount St. Mary's.
Wow. Well, that's great. And for us, for Halcyon, you have designed a course on health and virtue, Plato and Aristotle, which I asked you to do or suggested to you
Yes.
strongly. I don't know.
Strongly suggested. Well, I take your advice very seriously, Johannes. So when
um,
you, at the conclusion of the great
and
success, oh, go on. Sorry.
as I know, as I know from your conversation with Daniel of OG Rose, you thought in the beginning, "What the hell? What? Why health?" But then it all fell into place because you did see that it's actually in many places, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over Thomas's new course on health and virtue one last time. And we're doing that because the course starts in exactly 2 days. So today's Thursday, if you're watching this in replay, and the course begins or kicks off, as the young ones say, on September 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And is that 10 a.m. PST?
Yes.
Okay, so for all of you on the West Coast, that's 10 a.m. for you, 6 p.m. if you're in the UK, 7 p.m. Central European time. So let's just go over. I'll just go over very briefly over the technical details here of the course. So you head over to the enrollment page, which you find here. By the way, if you have a question for Thomas on the course, then ask the question in the chat, and we'll get to that question in the end. Can be a technical question just on the course itself, what to expect, how to prepare, etc. Or if you have a more detailed question already on Plato, Aristotle, with regards to health and virtue, just ask that question as well, and then Thomas will enlighten you. So if you head over to the enrollment page, you find all seminar dates here. You find the times. These are Zoom meetings. We'll email you the Zoom link an hour before the first session. So if you sign up for the seminars, which is this tier, as you scroll all the way down, the Philosophical Fellowship includes 5 seminars. There'll be 4 seminars led by Thomas, regular discussion seminars, as you know from a university, 2 hours long each. We record all those seminars, and we'll make those recordings obviously available privately only to the group. So you can listen back if you can't make it to one, or maybe you have to leave early or come in late or so. You can just listen back to the recording, and you can always listen back to the course contents later on. Now, we've done this for 5 years, and all of our students tell us that this is one of the greatest features because they can go back to a course that they attended 4 years ago, listen back to the conversation, and take notes again, go over their old notes, etc. So if you don't have time, though, for at least, I'd say, half of the seminars, then just take the self-study tier. Or if you're very keen on changing your life and becoming fully healthy under Thomas's guidance, you should take the philosophical dialogue with 4 private sessions on top of the seminars. And I should mention that with this tier and this tier as well, the second and the third, you get also, we will hold a symposium in week 6 where you'll give your own talk, a presentation, something that's changed for you. This could be either very academic or something very new. Maybe you want to produce a video or something on maybe how you've changed your life over the course of the seminars. That could be something that we're very open to all different kinds of media, and does not have to be a traditional presentation at all. We're also open to, if you're of the belief that it's a good human right to destroy yourself and live a very unhealthy life, then maybe you should sign up too and challenge Thomas as much as yourself, of course. So, Thomas, why don't you give us a overview over the 4 lectures and sessions, what people can expect and who the course is for, etc. Thank you.
Of course. I mean, obviously, as I was about to go into a tirade about, at the end of the beauty course, when we spoke, we did a post-mortem of the course and how successful it was. Your advisement for me was, or my next, if I was going to do another seminar course with Hao Kian, would be on the topic of health. And as you said, kind of hinted at, is that interesting enough, when we read Plato and Aristotle's texts on health, there is no central text. It's actually a presumed concept that we see across all their corpus of texts. And it's actually one of the key touch points on so many different aspects of ethics, ontology, epistemology, all these qualities or aspects of Greek thought of Plato and Aristotle. Health is actually there, just like beauty was hidden or kind of like residing in these classical texts. And actually, how interesting enough, we find that in health, there's a connection with beauty itself. So the overview is the lectures are broken into 4 parts. The first one is a general overview of the problem about, ironically, in our world of quantification and analysis and science, we would think that health is obvious and pre-given, but yet we look at historically, we actually see there's called a generational drift in health. We're actually getting not healthy. We're getting less healthy populationally. So what's going on here? If the account of modern materialism is true and held solid, then one would expect that progress continues forever. We should just keep getting better. But yet that seems to be not the case. So that's the preamble, the kind of preamble to set up to say, perhaps there might be something worth reconsidering about what we mean about health, especially under just like we saw beauty is something that we take for granted, yet maybe going back to the past, to the ancients, to reconsider what might health look like, just like beauty, might give us a new perspective of a deeper understanding. That's the preamble of the first lecture. And we walk through the ideas of that and the main concepts. The second lecture goes very systematically with a very broad cross-section of Plato and Aristotle on the topic of health. Because there is no one direct text about it, it is actually dispersed like beauty across all their texts. So we're dealing with, when I say this, I mean health is in the posterior analytic as much as it is in Nicomachean Ethics, for example. It is as much as in the Republic as it is in Philebus or Timaeus. Health is, again, this kind of touch point of the lines of thought of both Plato and Aristotle. So the second lecture really systematically and very rigorously works through what is meant by health by Plato and Aristotle. And there is a coherent argument made in these texts about what health means. So I help guide the students through understanding what this is for Plato and Aristotle. You could do this yourself, but you have to dig through basically all these texts, go into the Greek, and draw out what's being said systematically. The third lecture is starting to move from an understanding of the Greek understanding of health to how, as a kind of universal concept, to how do we apply this in our lives, especially in the modern world today. And we use actually the model of the moral virtues, especially courage, to talk through that. So how do we draw out the exemplars? And how do we draw the understanding of mapping the ancient understanding of health with the modern condition? That's the third lecture. And that follows up into the fourth lecture with a walkthrough of key takeaways that you can apply to your life right now, today, as well as the big takeaways of the concept of how health can be impacted on your life and in your digital experience. So both in body and in mental and in spiritual development. So that's the overview of the 4 lectures. It's done in a manner that is very rigorous, especially lectures 2 and 3 especially, are incredibly, I really drill down into the systematic walkthrough and try to make a very sequential understanding of a commentary lecture using my notes, reading of the text from Plato and Aristotle. And the 4th lecture and the 1st lecture use, I think, a lot of personal experience. So background, I was an amateur boxer, so I actually use my personal experience as an amateur boxer to talk through the connection of the body with intellectual development and how big takeaway again, in terms of I close on this at the end of the 1st lecture, that the body is not just a accidental thing that comes along the way in intellectual development. It is actually essential and key, connected, deeply intimate with intellectual development. So that's the overview of the 4 lectures and kind of what kind of person this is for. I think it's the kind of person that's interested in how can they develop virtue in their lives in a way that's concretely real in their material existence. Because I find that in health, we find it is actually to get the kind of deeper understanding of the ancients, what they mean by virtue, by goodness, by any of these concepts of beauty. Health is actually that touch point that isn't interesting that in the moderns, health is considered as raw materialist quantification. But actually, the way we know we reconsidered health is by seeing the deeper, intimate relationship of health with the metaphysics of ancient Greek philosophy. So that is for someone, if you find you want to kind of have a deeper connection what virtue can mean to you in your personal life today, that is not just a claptrap of ideology or kind of presumptions of perfunctory statements without any deeper real meaning signification, this is the course for you, because health is really that true touch point of how you can shape your life to beautify yourself, not just in body, but in mind and in activity. So that's my pitch if I had to give it out to a summary.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. And I think if you listen closely, everyone, you can hear that it's a very different approach to health than what we usually think of it. And you mentioned a few, different ideologies that are hurling around. I mean, one of the things that you could see the past decade or so was a reaction against a certain beauty image, a reaction that then, however, celebrated another extreme, the extreme of you can almost say, unwell bodies that are purposefully perhaps even unwell, which is, but you can see this is a sort of almost a superficial dialectic, and it never gets to the actual question: what is health for, or in what sense is health an end in itself? These are basically still all, in some sense, we look at health purely in a technical, in a purely functional manner. And I think what you're trying to show is that we can retrieve something from the ancients that would allow us also to regain an understanding of what it means to be human. Um, and also, I think that who the course is for, we have some people who've signed up who are in the health profession in very different ways. One of them is in alternative medicine, and someone else is, as far as I know, is a pharmacist. And we can also, I would say that if you are in the health profession, psychiatrist, perhaps even, or just a normal doctor, let's say, then, and you're wondering about, because I wouldn't, another extreme ideological discourse is, of course, that people would outright deny the validity or effectivity of conventional medicine, which is probably not the best response either. So what we're trying to do, and what Thomas is trying to do in this course also, is not to demonize quantification, but to let it be subjugated, I think one could say, or directed, orientated by quality. But go on.
Well, just on that note, that's a big part. Actually, a big part area I struggled building the lecture series was this problem, this tension, where the kind of, shall I say, shamanism, or kind of like this kind of escaping, running away from quantification, empiricism. That's something I did not want this course to do, because I don't think from reading Plato and Aristotle that's the conclusion you can walk away with. I think there's a lot of reality. This is a harmonization, that it's a kind of best way to put this. It's a kind of right ordering of the quantity. As we kind of hinted at in our last kind of live stream together, the purpose of quantification is remember. It's this idea of it is a kind of tool to assist with memory, to recollect, to recall. And it's a sense of orientation. And it helps you to keep orientation, because of what I talked through actually very clearly is that epidemiology, for example, kind of the last lecture, I kind of really use a case study to talk about this, is that the idea of epidemiology, study of health in populations, really came from a classical understanding of the relationship of sign and effect, right? Cause and effect of signs. They're using that Jon Snow, when I go from that citation, looking at his report on cholera outbreaks in London, he is using the modes of thinking of induction, of cause and effect that are coming from the classical thought process. So that's my point, is that this is not a antagonism of one of the core sources of modern medicine, epidemiology studies, was actually built on classical thought processes of understanding from science. Because you have to remember, in the study of cholera, they could not see the bacteria, like the cause, like actual the existence of the thing. They did not know it. They did not. They had to presume it. They had to work with this presumption of an absence, using the cause and effect relationship of signs to inference through what was the relationships that made things healthy and unhealthy according to place, at what time, in one occurrence, with and et cetera, et cetera. We'll build on this, but that's my point. So, like, with very clear understanding of quantification and measurement and observation, but held in memory in an account, I find that was I think a return, actually, not just to Aristotle and Plato, but again, these sources of modern medicine. You see that there's actually the deep, intimate relationship of thought is not antagonistic, but could be harmonized together. So I find that way, I think a return to the past reminds us there's potentially other ways to think about how medicine and health relate to each other.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, Jon Snow, just to mention this, English physician,
Yes.
and a lead in the development of anesthesia and medical hygiene, according to Wikipedia, who was pivotal to cure the cholera, and had to work, as Thomas described, not with all the instruments, with some instruments, but not all the instruments that we have now. And in some sense, because you mentioned absence, one could say that by making everything all too present and all too available, you begin to lose a bit that you have to work with absence to a certain degree, also. Or what does it mean to heal someone? Does that just mean to produce a certain standardized norm to reproduce that? Or does it mean to work with that specific body? So we're already in a discussion of what's the universal, what's the particular, what's the relationship between the two. If we're just trying to produce an abstract universal, well, then we're forgetting the particular, etc. So you can't escape philosophy, I'm afraid.
Yes, and that's exactly what Aristotle talks about this. Exactly, Nicomachean Ethics. Book 1 talks exactly about this point. The topic of health is immediately an issue of metaphysics because of this point. You have to deal with the question of healing of this body, right? Versus health as an abstraction.
Versus body.
Yes. Yeah, just even that point of body. What is a body? Even the nature of the organic, like the nature of the organ and the organic, like there's great. I don't want to. We'll talk about this. This is one of the areas of discussion.
Yeah,
it's very nuanced. For those who are interested in cybernetics, if you want to talk about who's interested, if you're interested in cybernetics, this is very much the idea of what the organic is, not just of biology. Like
yeah.
That's what Aristotle and Plato is pointing out to us. So it's very sophisticated.
Yes, and it's none of what we're trying to say is, because we're good Aristotelians here, is in any way against technology. When I speak, quote unquote, against transhumanism, what I see in transhumanism is simply an enhancement of what we barely misunderstand as what it means to be human. And that's the issue. What does Aristotle say in the Physics second book? Eide he techne mimetai ten physin. Now, my very German pronunciation of the Greek, forgive me, everyone. That means, but it is so that techne, technology, technics, or art, as it's usually translated also, mimics physin, nature. And that, so it's just, he just says it, in passing, basically. But this is his understanding of how nature and techne can go together. When art mimics, imitates nature, but that doesn't mean you have full access to nature, or you need to copy it or reproduce it, or try to be Victor Frankenstein, another book I read this summer. No, you work with it, you imitate it to a certain degree, but you're not trying to go over and beyond it. So in some sense, there's a relationship between transhumanism and usury. Nothing wrong with charging interest and giving out credit, but if you're using usury, or you have derivatives and all these things that we now have in synthetic high finance, then perhaps we've left behind what we might call the natural order. And so what we want to understand with this course, and basically what I want to understand in everything that I do, is how to um, how to be really, because I don't think that we are, be genuinely up for the task of the technological world. I don't think that we are. I think we're just using it as a tool, as a means, etc., but we're not really grappling with it. So this course invites you to not just think about health, metaphysics, virtue, what it means to be a virtuous person, etc., intellectually healthy, how body, mind, and soul come together, but also how, because we are always surrounded with having this discussion via YouTube, we're constantly online. We might, and this is basically some sort of an immortal space. It is disembodied. I mean, that's at least how what it pretends to be. So how, we want to understand, and I understand why young people go towards, some of them at least, go towards resistance training, because there's finally some resistance. The digital is there's no resistance, right? I can't touch you, I can't hear you. There's nothing that's either drawing you to me or the other way around, or pushing you away from me, etc. Except maybe, what we say, that myself, maybe we also get overly offended by what someone says, is because that's all that's left. It's just opinion, or someone's thought. So I'd like to hear any riff on anything, and then we'll go back to the course again.
I think a big note is that relation of techne to physis. I think is really important, because it's, the human being is a really interesting entity, right? In the sense that we are of nature, and our operations of our contact with nous. Now, this debate makes an issues about that relationship, but our relationship to nous, of apprehending, this is part of this idea of our power of abstraction. So one of the qualities that makes us human very uniquely is that we can see the natural world, and we can apprehend via abstraction, basically some phantasms of abstraction. So the geometric circles or things like that, from natural occurring objects. And then via a relationship of mimesis with abstraction, we participate and work with nature. That's my riff on this point. And it's very interesting because there's ideas here. And then, for example, I just riff a point about this. Architecture has we talk about this in the course, as architecture is a really interesting vector about this, because it's the idea of place, the context of the place. Health has a very deep relationship to place, as we're going to discuss with Aristotle especially. And place in architecture has relationships where how we shape spaces and places has effects on the healthiness or unhealthiness of a space. The example used for Tertullius, I cite this idea of, for example, building cities in marshlands has a correlation. People get sick. But if we have running water designed, we work the space to have running water through it. We can turn a space that was in a marsh that was once unhealthy to be healthy, meaning people are not getting sick. So under that language of it, I find, so that's really the uniquely human quality of working with physis, where it is not a kind of Frankensteinian destruction or mutilation. It's a working with. And partly kind of how does that play out? I think a quality I really resonate with is as play in Aristotle of the note that the physician, like the physicist, right, is supposed to be the one who works with the dialectics as well as material necessity, working with both hypothetic necessity and material necessity. It's the kind of, I play with this in Encanto's play echo of the two quality of those two kinds of necessity that makes the human have a very important role to play in the world. And that very much is the operation. Health is kind of hinting at or showing us glimmers of that quality when that's done in a fitting way. Which, by the way, just to riff on that again, the discussion in Aristotle of the golden mean, right? This discussion of the mean. How do we find the mean? How do we find the mean? I find a lot of modern ethicists kind of freaking out about, wait a minute. You're saying that we need the man of virtue to tell us what the mean is? We can't just use an algorithm. We can't find this objective external measure to tell us what is the mean in all these applications. But when we see deeper, what we mean by this, health is a kind of mean. And how's that found in the particular circumstances? It's this relationship to prudence, which is the man of the particular, right? This kind of responsiveness to the particular circumstance. So thus, I see in techne this relationship to the particular circumstance. It's the interplay of the activity of memory with abstraction and mimesis, working in physis all together in a deep, very deeply, rightly ordered enmeshment together, right? Not this kind of harsh separation distinction move in the full sense that I think a lot of contemporaries think about, not just in the nature, as I'm just drawing out as one point, is that on the nature of ethics. How do we find the meaning of things? Modernist ethics, utility or intention. Usually those are the ways we talk about it. We can isolate and pull through a particularity. That's how we find the mean. But that's not the Aristotelian stance, not even close. And I think a similar point about health is that health is found in the in response to the particular circumstance, not in this abstractional state.
Yeah, yeah. And that abstractional states can be, it can have detrimental effect if you're just trying to produce a certain, certain, let's just say, universal, without considering the particular this body and the mean for this situation. And if it's always just cookie cuts reproduction, let's say, or recipe, yeah, go on.
Yeah, just so I cite Christopher Alexander a bit on this point, is that yes, this issue of a modular approach of impression, that this idea of a universal premise, right, being stamped on to every particular circumstance, which is ignoring the minor premise of moral reasoning, which requires a response to the particular circumstances. You inherently are dealing with the false when you're doing that, because you're imposing a universal model to all circumstances. There's a reason why Aristotle closes his area on justice with equity. Equity is the correction of error that is by necessity going to happen if you apply universal law in all cases. Equity has to come in to restore the error that came in. So I find this, just to build on this point, I find this very deeply in Aristotle's line of thought, that this kind of abstraction, that's the thing, because remember, this process of abstraction is our activity of nous. Like, this is very part of the human experience, but it's when it's divorced from all these other elements, these other aspects that harmonize it and unify it. It's when we have these literally running into falsehood.
Yeah, that's what AI is running into, which is already showing. It's becoming apparent that simply just scaling up is not going to cut it. So some are already speaking of the, I think, third AI winter. So this is not the first time that this would be happening. Just simply now it's more public, because now you can pay ChatGPT a monthly fee to have it spit out the ever same text. Rewritten all the time, but you can see the wording is always basically the same. It's PR language. So the course also invites us to ponder this age of AI and its potential, its pitfalls, and also very, obviously its limitations. Go on.
Well, Johannes, I want to add a note, because the live seminar sessions are happening starting this Saturday.
Yes.
I think this is a really important aspect of what it means to be human, in the sense that it's that process of not just memory. Memory is not just information storage like a computer RAM. It is the working with others and living in the living word, where we're in thought, working in thought together. And you going through the course, going through the seminars, going through the readings, and processing through yourself a piece of writing. That's one of my favorite things about the Halcyon model right here, this course structure, is that process. I really push this point. You got to write something down. You got to process. You got to come to these courses, have the discussions, and process through in writing a synthesis of an insight, because the revelation of relevance for you, that what you're resonating in and how you're taking away from these writings and the readings, etc., and discussions, that is uniquely human. That kind of that revelational insight and cultivation of the mind and thought, that is very different than just processing mediated through ChatGPT, aka points of people going to ChatGPT to be their therapist, or to be their imagine having into a philosophical discourse with ChatGPT. I got curious, and I did that about a year ago in curiosity, and it's not
Mhm.
this. It is not even close to what the quality of experience is like in a kind of grouping like the Halcyon seminar. So I just wanted to just riff on that point.
Yeah, that's great. And you know what uh, those chatbots do is they it's very typical of cybernetic systems. They reproduce a positive feedback loop constantly, so they will feed you back anything that you want to hear, really, um, and which is the opposite of what a good therapist does. For example, if we're talking psychotherapy, we'll do the exact opposite. We'll listen to you for some time, but then at some point tell you, well, um, here's what you have to do. Here's what you have to do to change your life, and not just feedback on how wonderful and insightful you are, etc. Um, but it's fascinating that there's this openness even to talking to this, because you know if you're lonely, there's someone just commenting about loneliness in
Yeah, I'm seeing. I see that.
Twitter.
I've seen that comment.
I mean, you know, I can't speak on anyone's personal life, and this is not about you, whoever you are. But there's something about the experience of loneliness that we shouldn't disregard. It's part of human existence. Some of the greatest minds were quite lonely, and it's you know, I wonder though whether we're not even willing to it's this demand of everything having to be, I don't know, it's difficult to say because I don't want to be say anything that might be hurtful or anything, but you can go, you can jump in if you want, but I wonder if not, with loneliness, for example, especially, whether it wouldn't be better to face that loneliness head on, rather than trying to escape from it, um, and and see how that perhaps changes something. Because you might be surprised other people are lonely too. You know, you might find, uh, and I would always prefer someone try and find someone else, a person, a human being online to talk to, rather than a chatbot.
I'm blanking on who it's attributed to, but
Yeah,
the idea of reading the classics as your friends,
yeah.
that came to my mind very quickly.
That's
Um,
everyone. Nietzsche, for example, sorry, said that his friends are Goethe and Wagner. Actually, he did know, but Goethe he never met. And even Socrates, even though he hated him. But you know, it's a love-hate relationship. You can find once one of my friends many years ago, a friend of mine in Italy said to me, you know, friend, my books are my best friends because they don't there there's something with, and I mean an actual book, you know, a physical book that you can have an erotic relationship with. This is Dostoevsky. That you know you keep, and that can be more of a friend, and it's also talking back to you, but it's challenging you.
yeah.
Sorry, you were saying something and I was interrupting
No,
you.
just I was basically going to say along what you just said along those lines is that I think it's the relationship, the summary note. I mean, I find reading Aristotle's note about friendship, I think actually the key essential quality about it, I think very distinct from the moderns versus the past on what friendship actually is.
Yeah,
Friendship is what demands something of you. It's the contribution you need to give to friendship, not what I receive from it. As a general presuppositional like stance about it. I say this because what you just hinted at, which is, these are the treat texts as classics as your friends. These are in your discourse that you're in discourse with. You have to draw it out. It's not going to be given to you because that kind of the illusion of ChatGPT is it's its passivity, right? You can
yeah.
just type in and just self confirm, right, and just talk through. But when you have a text that is difficult, challenging, it demands something of you, and that kind of the activity of you working with the text, you kind of reveal something new about yourself, and you get new insights, and you kind of get this kind of virtuous cycle of insight and cultivation and inquiry. This kind of that's why you're known by kind of erotic is not wrong, and intuition is, I think it's very correct, that note about it is a kind of challenging and revealing of something of a kind of inquiry, kind of drawing through, a kind of search of kind of hunting through and thinking through the text. But that's what to text, by the way, let alone your colleagues that you like, the kind of people who are self-selecting to join Halcyon and other spaces like it. These are your philosophical friendships, right? In search and inquiry with each other. And I think especially that you're hinted at of the possibility of difference, right? That in these spaces of discourse and investigation and inquiry, people might come to conclusions. They might come to, you might read the same text and have very different conclusions from it. And that's an interesting sense of not just self-confirmation, but inquiry of why that's the case. That's really fascinating. Seeing difference is not this thing to obfuscate and remove. They kind of in the smooth, self-confirming, positive regard of just, your algorithms confirming what you already believed. But sitting with difference and considering what would that mean if this is legitimate? If this, what would the consequences of this thought? How did this thought come to be? And where does this sit? You might still reject it at the end, but just to have that activity of thought, it's very. When we find that in philosophical friendship, this is actually the best, most rewarding kind of experience we can have.
Yes, wonderful. That's where Logos comes to sing. But it's not just in bland agreement. It's, as you can, any sort of Platonic dialogue is full of disagreement and battle in the intellectual sense.
That's the contest. Which we talk about in lecture 3. So yes, we talk about the necessity of the contest. Yes, we talk about that.
Excellent. So lecture 3, that's in 3 weeks for all of you who sign up, which is what you have to do now because we're closing enrollment. So head over to this website here, which is in the link, which are in the description of this video. There's a link. It's also in the live chat if you're watching this live. It's underneath the Twitter live stream as well if you're watching this on Twitter. So head on over there now, join us, find the others. You'd be surprised how many people are out there who are perhaps similarly inclined as you. This is why I call this second-tier philosophical fellowship. We have seen people meet across countries. 2 years ago, someone flew in from America to meet all the friends he made in the UK. I think he now resides somewhere else in Europe. And this has happened many times over. Many people in America, because so many Americans sign up to these courses. The Americans, I know you live all everywhere, so far apart, but still, you all have cars and airports everywhere, so you can drive and fly everywhere. No, I think it's really something that we've seen over this half a decade now, that people do become friends based on a shared interest. It's quite an interesting phenomenon because you're no longer bound to just we're talking about space and locality. There can be digital spaces that open up, but they need to be discursive and dialogical, to use this term from John Vervaeke, and really inquisitive, etc., and not just one where you're confronted with basically your own biases and a certain positivity in all senses of the word. Positivity meaning givenness, but also this fake positivity. So I hope that all of you who are listening can join us. Head over to the enrollment page now. The Philosophical Fellowship starts this Saturday. 5 seminars over 6 weeks. So we'll be starting this Saturday, every single Saturday in September. You'll meet at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Thomas will guide you through that. All seminars will be recorded. And the final seminar is the symposium, where you can present your own work, reflections, a poem, a song. Maybe you took maybe you made a video diary throughout this time. Anything you want to do, perfect. We're completely open when it comes to the format. That's up to you, but it's part of the experience that you begin to reflect on. Maybe just your own habits, how you think about health, etc., and what you're changing, or how you maybe understand Plato anew now after having gone through this course. And also, that's not forget that this is really a course also, I think, for if you're an absolute beginner, because people always ask me, where do you begin with philosophy? How do you learn how to swim? You have to step in the water. Same is true for philosophy. You have to start reading, but this is so immediate because, as Thomas says, your health is yours, and you're always with it. So it begins with the body, with you, and in your mind and soul. So here is a good entry point, I think, into philosophy. And you are going to read excerpts from some of the most important Platonic dialogues, and also some of the most important texts by Aristotle, the Physics and the Nicomachean Ethics, just being two of them. So, and I hear the person who raised loneliness says, I should try that, face my loneliness head on. Well, there you go. Good. So, I should say Harris gifted 5 memberships to listeners here. Thank you so much, Harris. And I hope that you can join the course. Let me know if you'd like to. You can send me an email if you want. We'd be very happy to have you back for this one. Thank you so much for your generosity over the years, Harris. And thank you so much, Thomas, for putting this course together, for all the work that you've put in. On top of everything else that you are doing, you are a very busy man.
But very rewarding. I could not. I'm full of bounty, Johannes. I'm just so full of bounty and beauty in my life.
Yeah, but you are. But you're also the work that you deliver then is really thoughtful, and you go in depth. And by the way, I'm just showing everyone now what it looks like on the inside. So this is Thomas here this is no green screen. This is real. He's in the woods. So this is what it looks like when you actually enroll. You can listen to the so I've turned the audio off. So you can scroll down, you find his essay. That's 13 pages you can download and print off. There's an audio file you can listen to. There's actually an app by Teachable.
Welcome back. So we are on lecture number.
Sorry, when you download that was just turned itself on. But if you enroll, you see. So I think this is the 3rd lecture. Yes, Play and Courage, exactly. So you see here Plato's Phaedo, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. You find those texts extremely accessible, available on the internet. 2 questions that you'll be discussing at the seminars, or if you do this on your own time, that you can think about in your own time. You can print these off and take notes. I always recommend anyone who takes these courses to take handwritten notes in a specific notebook just for the course. Anything will do. Any size will do, as long as it's good enough paper. It doesn't have to be anything special, because you can go back to those notes. So thank you again so much, Thomas, and thank you everyone else for listening. And see you all on Saturday when we embark on a journey to well-being with Plato and Aristotle.